All right, welcome back. Today, while riding our little Jetson Bolt, we're going to talk about the differences between a low-end bike and a high-end bike. And for this comparison, I'm going to be using only bikes that I have ridden and or owned. So at the low end, let's talk about that for a moment. At the low end, we're going to be talking about the Swagtron EB7, which is what I'm on, which is about $700, and the Jetson Bolt. Now I know there's a Pro version, but we're going to just talk about the traditional Jetson Bolt version, which they still sell. It's the $300 little bike that they sell at Costco, a little electric bike. On the high end, we're going to talk about Super 73R series, which ranges from about $2,700 to $3,200 on average. And we're going to talk about the Case and Cabot, which I've ridden many times, which is about $2,000. So by no means am I making a determination of which type of bike is better. I'm just simply trying to give those that are considering a purchase some information. So let's talk about different criteria and where these bikes fit. First of all, overall, let's say stability. And again, this is my opinion. Having ridden the Jetson Bolt and having ridden, including right now, the Swagtron EB7, I can tell you that it's kind of like sitting on top of a stilt. You know, you're up the right level, but you're just a little wobbly. And that's not to say that if you're a smaller person, let's say 100 pounds, it's probably fine. But if you're a bigger person like myself, that's 210, it's a teeny bit wobbly. Now, the Jetson Bolt, because it has very small components, very small wheels, very thin frame, very thin handlebar stem, you feel a lot more wobbly than you would on the Swagtron. But even so, the Swagtron, the bike I'm on now, you still feel a little wobbly. When you're on a high-end bike, again, I'm not going to keep talking about which ones, because we're going to talking about now the Super 73 R series and the Swagtron. It's kind of like being in like an SUV versus a scooter. You know, you've got a lot of girth around you. It's very stable. For one, the Super 73 has dual shock, so that even helps, so, you know, significantly. The Case and Cabot has front shocks, but overall, you know, because it has big tires, it has a strong frame, it has good suspension, you just feel like you're on something much more formidable and, you know, strong. It has a strong base structure you feel on. You're not wobbly at all. And the fact that it has wider tires, you're very stable. The way I kind of describe that is if I'm riding I'm riding with no hands right now on this little thing, like, wow, it's wobbly. If I ride with no hands on the fat tire high-end bikes, no problem, you know, almost rides itself. So that's kind of stability, and I think comfort goes along with that. Big fat tires, the big durable frame, the suspension, the high-end suspension, you're just a lot more comfortable. And it typically has a bigger banana seat, the high end, as opposed to a small little bicycle seat for the low-end bikes. Now let's talk about speed. So speed obviously has a lot of variables. A lot of it depends on how you ride, you know, pedal assist 1, 2, 3, throttle only, your weight, the terrain, the hills, etc. But let's just say, all things being equal, let's say you're just riding in the street. So on a low-end bike, because you have small wheels, that typically means you have a smaller sprocket if in fact you have gears, and you have a smaller battery, and you probably have a smaller motor. The Swagtron, for example, has a 350 watt rear hub motor. The Jetson Bolt has a 250 watt rear hub motor. And on the high end, the Cason has a 1000 watt and the Super 73 has a 1200 watt. Again, on the small end, low end, they have 36 volt batteries. On the high end, they typically have 48 volt batteries. You're talking about wheel size, you're talking about gearing, you're talking about battery size. It just gives you tremendous power on the high end when you're talking about the higher end bikes. But that being said, what's an interesting caveat, the case and cab, it goes about 20 miles an hour. And so does the Jetson Bolt if you unlock the secret setting in the app. So, you know, that kind of debunks what I'm talking about. But if you were to look at the Swagtron, 15 miles an hour, and if you were to look at the Super 73, 30 miles an hour. So a lot of it depends on settings and all that. But overall, typically the higher end bike's going to give you some higher end power, whether it's power off the line from a dead stop or top end power. So let's talk about what's obviously very related to that, which is range. Again, bigger the battery, you know, typically the higher the amp hours, the watt hours, the more range you're going to get. The 36 volt battery, you know, is a direct impact on how much range you're going to get. These low end bikes, I can tell you from my experience, you know, if you're using some level of pedal assist and you're not killing it with, you know, the highest level of pedal assist, and you're not going up hills, you know, you're just on, like, let's say a street, you know, you're looking at 10, 12, 15 miles, perhaps max. If you're looking at the high-end bikes, you could be looking at upwards of 25 to 30, you know, and that's even with some throttle only. So range, much better. Now let's talk about quality of components. There are some caveats, but typically when you look at the low end, you're talking about some flimsy items, perhaps the brakes, perhaps the fenders. The Jetson Bolt, for example, I can tell you that the fenders are very, 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 very flimsy. You could just flick it with your finger and it would just wobble. And you could basically bend it in half with 3 fingers. As opposed to the fenders on a Super 73 are, you know, extremely durable. I can tell you, right before I got on this Swagtron and I kicked up the kickstand, I've only gone 38 miles on this bike. I just bought it. I kicked up the kickstand and the rubber stopper that touches the ground fell off. That's just an example, right? I've had the Super 73 for 600 miles and, you know, haven't had that kind of a problem, you know? But here's the caveat. There's always caveat. Caveat is this Swagtron has 7-speed Shimano gear system. Now granted, it's the low end of Shimano, but it's still pretty good quality. But on the flip side, you can hear the brakes squealing on this thing. They don't really squeal on the higher end bikes. So there's obviously some trade-offs, but in general, higher end bikes are gonna have higher end components. I think what probably goes with the quality of the components is the durability, you know, the long term, right? I've heard many people, including some of the bigger bike review websites, you know, including Electric Bike Review, say you're not going to keep one of these low-end bikes for 5 years. You know, it's an 18-month to a year long. It's kind of like getting a couch at IKEA as opposed to a high-end furniture store. It just doesn't have the best components. It's not going to last forever. It's kind of like a temporary solution, right? Unless you're going to really ride it like, you know, like a baby. You know, you're going to baby it. So in terms of durability, you know, typically you hear on social media, on, you know, Reddit, etc. Some people have had the high-end bikes for years, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You look at the small-end bikes, you're probably not going to see this Swagtron in my possession for more than 18 months. It's just going to break, I can tell you right now. And then because it only costs $700, are you really going to spend, you know, a few $100s for, you know, new gearing, new handlebar stem, new battery? No, you'll probably just buy a new one. So therefore, that's why it doesn't last. Oh boy, kind of got myself in some tricky terrain here. Let's talk about size. So these small bikes on the low end, they're typically smaller. They typically have lower wheelbase, wheel size. They typically have smaller frames. And although you can adjust the seat, you know, the overall capacity to handle a bigger rider is very limited on a low-end bike. For example, I'm almost 6 foot. On this bike, I have the seat extended almost as far as it can go, the seat stem, and it still doesn't let me, you know, pedal fully. My knees are still a little bent, you know, as opposed to where I should be. I should be able to almost fully extend my legs with my knee bent a little bit, but they're really bent at like 45 degrees. So on the high end, those bikes are meant for bigger riders. So I can tell you the Super 73, for example, I had my neighbor who's 6'5" ride it, no problem. I can tell you right now, on a Jetson Bolt, he will be like a giant on a clown bike. On even this Swagtron, there's no way anybody over like 6'2" was riding this thing. I have seen a comment from somebody saying they were 6'5" and they rode it, but you know, God bless the guy, but I can't imagine it was terribly comfortable. It's just not meant for bigger people. So another thing to keep in mind when you're comparing these bikes, in terms of, we're going to kind of jump back to durability again. Not just talking about the components now, but in terms of, you know, overall durability of the frame, right? You feel like on a Jetson Bolt or on this Swagtron, you know, the Jetson Bolt has fold down handlebars. This Swagtron has fold down handlebars and a folding frame. It folds in half. You feel like if you were to get into a wreck, God forbid, this thing would just collapse under you, you know? As we're on the high end, the bike's gonna probably still be around, you know? It's kind of like getting in a wreck on a motorcycle versus a sedan. The sedan, there's a lot more metal around you. You just feel a little safer. So there's that. The other thing is, anything that is foldable, you know, just by nature of the fact that it folds, can't be as strong. It's something that's not foldable as a single piece. So I kind of liken it to when I was going to buy a kayak. I wound up buying a single piece, you know, plastic kayak, and it's durable and it's, you know, really strong and it's great. In terms of, they have foldable ones, or, you know, not foldable ones, ones that can break in half. You know, they come in sections and you assemble it with like a latch, you know, at the leg where you're going to ride it. Now, yeah, it probably is pretty durable, or they wouldn't make them, but you're riding something on the water that just by the nature of how it's assembled has cracks. Doesn't that just kind of make you feel a little uneasy, you know? So that's kind of what I like in a foldable bike too. You know, it can only be so strong, you know? I mean, the integrity of it is obvious. It's obviously already broken and it's being held together by a little metal latch. What if that latch comes undone, for example? So there's that. Another one I don't really care about, but some people would, is the vanity sake. So you're riding a little Jetson Bolt or a little Swagtron, and again, you know, they're like little toys, you know, and you feel kind of cute on it. You don't feel very manly. You kind of don't want your neighbors to see you, but you're on something like a Super 73 or a Kaysen, and you feel like you're riding a Harley, and you kind of feel like a badass, and you want your neighbors to see you, and you want people to be envious. I can tell you, riding around the Swagtron, I've never seen anybody say awesome bike, but I've seen a bunch of people say like, what is that? On my Super 73, I got asked all the time, what is that? That thing is awesome. How much is it? I want to get one, right? So that's the difference. Let's see, what else? Okay. Typically, the higher end, you know, purpose-built electric bikes, I'm not just talking about like a $7,000 Trek mountain bike that has, you know, some electric components. I'm talking about bikes like this one and Super 73, etc., that are built for, you know, to be an electric bike. Typically the higher end ones have bigger tires, bigger in terms of diameter and bigger in terms of width. So the Jetson Bolt and this Swagtron, again, the Swagtron has 16-inch by 1.5-inch tires. The Jetson Bolt has, I'm kind of guessing, but it's probably 12-inch by like 1 inch, really small. And you know, it's not going to give you the comfort, the feel, the speed, the durability that you're looking for. In terms of a higher end bike, you've got big, thick 20-inch tires. They're usually about between 2.5 and 4 inches wide. It's just going to give you more stability. It's going to give you more comfort. It's going to give you, you know, better carving capability. And you're just going to feel overall just more stable. So on the low end bikes, you typically have small wheels, and it's not terribly difficult to get your hands on replacement wheels and tires, not wheels, tires and inner tubes on the bigger bikes. On the smaller bikes, I mean, other than, I guess, going on Amazon, I tried, and it's not the easiest to find little 12-inch inner tubes that are going to fit this, that are going to fit the Jetson Bolt, or 14-inch. You know, they're kind of specialized. I mean, you look at most of the bikes, and most of them have between 20 and 26-inch tires, wheels, not these little 12 or 14 or 16-inch, right? Something else to consider is just the simplicity of the design. So on the low end, I can tell you, I had to change the tire on this thing, this little Swagtron, the other day, and it took me like 1.5 minutes to get the tire off, because it doesn't have any, you know, special bolts and design elements. It's just a freaking wheel and an axle and a couple end bolts, and that's it. Super 73, for example, not all high-end bikes are like this, but some are, has specialized components. It has non-standard bolts. It has weird angles that the tire has to fit into. You have to take off all these zip ties and things just to get at the freaking bike, you know, just to get at the back wheel, for example. Case and cabin is a little easier, but still, it's not as simple as just doing a couple bolts and popping it off. You know, there's a little bit more to it. So simplicity of design. These small bikes are pretty freaking easy. And I can tell you that the Jetson Bolt is pretty much the same thing. It doesn't take much, you know? So there's that. The other thing is portability. I can tell you, with a truck, it's kind of easy. I have a truck, but before I had my truck, you know, I tried to put my high-end bike in the back seat, no go. Tried to put it in my trunk, no go. Then I had to try to put it in my large SUV, and I had to have like the wheel sticking out the back window, right? If you have a truck, you know, obviously all things are equal. You can throw anything in a truck, but if you have a sedan or an SUV, then these large bikes are going to be a challenge. You definitely don't want to take the wheel off. Like I said, it's a pain in the butt, and it's going to, you know, be a real challenge to get it in. It's heavy, so in terms of picking it up, getting it to fit and all that. The foldable bikes, just the fact that they fold down, they're so much more portable. This Swagtron, you can fold it in half, the handlebars fall down, and the whole form factor is like, you know, 30 inches by 20 inches. And you could easily fit it not only in the back seat or the trunk, but you could even fit it in the front seat, you know, just on the seat. It's that small. And the Jetson Bolt is even easier. It's just a teeny little thing. So you almost feel like you could put it in a duffel bag, you know? I would bet that you could probably put a Jetson Bolt with the handlebars folded down in a duffel bag. So that's kind of the difference there. But what goes along with the portability of a small bike, again, the integrity of the frame. You know, things are foldable, including the pedals, for example. You know, on this little Swagtron, these pedals literally can fold in half. So how good could they be? You know what I mean? As opposed to, you know, high-end mountain bike pedals on, you know, a larger high-end bike. So how good could the freaking pedals be? You know, you feel like you fall, you know, you fall over on the bike and it's going to just crack the pedals. As where on a high-end bike, you know, you definitely have a little bit more durability on those. So in the end, what you decide to buy comes down to a lot of variables. hopefully I gave you something to think about in this video in terms of the difference between a low-end bike and a high-end bike. Personally, I think low-end bikes are fun. They're cute. They're really nimble. They're inexpensive. The fact that you're on small wheels means you're closer to the ground, so you feel like you're kind of one with the road. They're very nimble because they're very small. They can turn on a dime. The larger ones are more like driving a Cadillac, you know? You have a lot more capabilities, and it's a lot more comfortable and durable. But again, the price. So it's kind of a trade-off. So hopefully that gives you an idea. If you have any questions specifically that I can answer, feel free to put them in the comments. And, you know, I hope you enjoyed the video. God bless. Peace out.